Title: Celebrity book clubs, a rising trend in the literary world. The rise of celebrity book clubs continues as Dua Lipa joins the likes of Oprah Winfrey and Reese Witherspoon in launching her very own book club. While the trend may have started with Oprah's book club back in 1996, celebrities like Kaia Gerber and Reese Witherspoon have also made big business through their bookish interests. However, the influence of celebrity book clubs is not without criticism, with some authors and critics snubbing their picks for being too commercial rather than critically acclaimed. Nevertheless, the popularity of these book clubs has contributed to a revival of reading culture in the digital age. Could you work with your family? Many generations of this family have made it work. Ray Taylor's family farm in southern Queensland has been in operation since World War II, when the American military turned up at their farm in search of salad lines. Today, the Taylor family farm is a thriving business that has been passed down through 4 generations. While Ray is proud of his innovations in farming, he is most proud of teaching the next generation. Farming is in his blood and he wants to encourage the next generation to grow the business to the next level with technology and smarts. Retracing the steps of a World War I veteran, Tom Elliott follows his father's path. 92-year-old Tom Elliott, accompanied by his family, finally visited the places where his father, Jim, fought in World War I. Jim never spoke much about his time in France, but Tom's children researched and traced his itinerary, following it across Belgium and France. Tom visited the places where his father endured horrors, returning to Villers-Bretonneux, where Jim suffered from mustard gas and stayed on to rebuild the countryside. Reflecting on his visit, Tom shared his first impression of the cemeteries, discovering that most of the Allied troops were buried where they fell. Title: How Diversity Helped 2023's Farmers of the Year Keep a 150-year-old operation running strong. The Herbert family has been named 2023's Farmer of the Year for their innovative business practices and diversification of their farming operations. The 6th-generation farming family runs a medium-sized feedlot for about 6,000 head of cattle, 2,000 sheep, and breeds a number of Angus cows, alongside some cropping. The Herberts have successfully weathered the drought, the pandemic, and catastrophic flooding, which caused significant losses to their pastures and crops. The judges were impressed with their innovation, good fodder growth, and the amount of industry work Tess Herbert has done. Mr. Herbert has been using new farming techniques to improve paddocks and reduce the weed burden. The highly diversified operation has given the Herberts a good foundation to rebuild from. Robots, high-density planting, just some of Young Farmer of the Year's fresh ideas. Mitchell McNabb, the Young Farmer of the Year, believes that robots will play a significant role in the future of fruit growing. McNabb, who is a 5th-generation apple, pear, and stone fruit grower, stated that robotics would help reduce production costs, which is a significant challenge for the industry. He also believes that a high-density planting system could bring stability to the industry by increasing revenue and profitability. McNabb's willingness to explore new ideas and technologies is critical for the industry to remain competitive globally. New South Wales Aboriginal leaders say more education needed for Indigenous voice referendum. As the Australian Senate passed legislation for a voice to Parliament, Indigenous community leaders say it's a step towards amplifying Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voices. However, some leaders like Wiradjuri and Kamilaroi woman Lynette Riley feel conflicted, believing that a referendum should not be necessary. While the proposed voice would be an independent body that can advise the government on issues like health, education, economic disadvantage, and social matters, community leaders say more education is needed to explain its importance and encourage a yes vote. The vote is set to take place no sooner than 2 months and no later than 6 months away. NT government enlisted lobbying firm to secure federal support for $1.5 billion project. Documents obtained under Freedom of Information laws reveal that the NT government paid almost $150,000 in consulting fees to Dragoman Pty Limited, a lobbying firm, to sway the federal government's support for a gas-based manufacturing hub on Darwin Harbour. The project, Middle Arm Sustainable Development Precinct, received $1.5 billion in funding from the Morrison government in 2021. The site is undergoing environmental assessment for green hydrogen, minerals processing, low-emissions petrochemicals, and carbon capture and storage. Environmentalists criticized the project's planned use of gas. Dragoman was selected under a select tender process, with no other companies asked to apply. Why are Australians turning to private security guards in record numbers? The private security industry in Australia is growing at an unprecedented rate, with more private security guards patrolling public places. According to Brian De Caires, the head of the Australian Security Industry Association, the demand for private security has been growing every year. Due to the rise in antisocial behaviour and increasing inequality, those who can afford it are using private security services to provide an extra layer of security. The trend is polarizing, with some finding private security reassuring while others find it alarming. Whether the increase in private security correlates with an increase in crime is yet to be seen. Title: 8 months on, Cassius Turvey's death still felt at Perth's Swan City Youth Services Centre. Cassius Turvey's death continues to impact the community of Perth's eastern suburbs, particularly at the Swan City Youth Services Centre where the teenager often spent time with his friends. The 15-year-old was allegedly attacked with a metal pole on his way home from school and passed away in the hospital 10 days later. His group of friends has stopped coming to the service as they cope with grief. Cassius' mother, Michelle Turvey, hopes that young people affected by her son's death can return to the service, which provides holistic support to keep young people on the right path. Hashtags. Title: **** Sugarcane researcher wins Excellence in Ag Research Prize. Sugar cane plant pathologist Robert McGarry has been awarded this year's Excellence in Ag Research Prize in the Australian Farmer of the Year Awards for his contributions to pest and disease management in the sugar industry. Dr. McGarry has spent most of his 40-year career working at the Sugar Research Australia facility in Tully, Queensland, where he helped discover a new pathogen that causes Pachymetra root rot, a damaging disease found only in Australia. The discovery and management of Pachymetra saved the industry roughly $50 million annually. Dr. McGarry encouraged young scientists to consider a role in managing crop diseases. Hashtags, ***. Title: Tasmanian Caravan Park residents face displacement as council approves resort plan. Description: Central Coast Council in Tasmania has approved a development application to convert Penguin Caravan Park into a beachside resort, much to the dismay and distress of long-term residents who fear displacement and exposure to a tight rental market. Many of the park's residents, including Dakota French, who lives with physical and mental disabilities, have been unable to secure alternative accommodation. The council has invited community input and submitted recommendations to the Tasmanian Planning Commission, but the displaced residents fear being served with a notice to vacate. Hashtags. Title: Concerns raised over environmental impact of synthetic turf in Australia. The use of synthetic turf in sports fields in New South Wales has prompted concerns about the potential environmental impact of the turf. According to a report by the state's chief scientist, Professor Hugh Durrant-White, there is insufficient information about the materials and chemicals used in the turf, and doubts about its performance claims under Australian climatic conditions. Community groups have protested about the loss of green space and raised concerns about microplastics and heat. While the EU has banned the use of rubber infill made from recycled tyres, Australia has yet to follow suit. Craft beer breweries face financial struggles as sales decline and costs rise. Craft beer breweries are facing increasing financial pressures as rising operational costs and declining sales affect the industry. Wicked Elf Brewery in Port Macquarie, New South Wales, is the latest to shut its doors, citing costs like electricity that are now higher than rent. General Manager Dan Farden believes that craft beer is becoming a luxury item, particularly as household budgets tighten. The Independent Brewers Association is bracing for more closures, as raw materials like barley and hops have increased by over a third. Brewers that were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic are now experiencing inflation and other financial challenges. French green energy giant Neoen builds multi-billion-dollar battery in Western Australia's coal heartlands. French renewable energy provider, Neoen, has started construction on one of Australia's largest batteries at Collie, Western Australia. The battery will have a capacity of 1 gigawatt and a duration of 4 hours. The project will be built in stages, with a capacity of 219 megawatts in the first stage. The battery will come online by the end of next year. The move is expected to fill the gap left by the retirement of Collie's aging coal-fired generators. Neoen's Collie project is its first in Western Australia. The company is eyeing further opportunities across the country, including in Western Australia. Title: New South Wales Treasurer Daniel Mulcahy defers tax hike for Sydney's casinos until August, blaming previous government's failure to liaise. New South Wales Treasurer Daniel Mulcahy has deferred the tax hike for Sydney's casinos until August, blaming the previous government's failure to liaise with the casinos about the changes. The tax hike, which was due to take effect on July 1, had been projected to raise $364 million over 3 years. Mulcahy said that despite the Perrottet government budgeting for the new rates, they remained unlegislated. Mulcahy added that he had met with the casino leadership teams and discussed how to implement the changes in a way that minimises the impact on jobs. The announcement comes as the state faces a precarious financial situation, with $188 billion owed to creditors in just a few years' time. Hashtags. Housing Minister won't rule out dumping signature $10 billion fund in favour of easier paths to building housing. The Australian federal government has failed to pass its $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund (HAF), with the Greens and Coalition delaying a vote on the matter until October. Housing Minister Julie Collins has refused to comment on whether the government would bring the legislation back for debate later this year. She has, however, suggested the government may pursue easier paths to building homes. The Greens have called for further concessions to support renters and a national rent freeze. The Community Housing Industry Australia CEO claims the legislation is a good start, but more needs to be done to address housing shortages. NTT Data, a global company that lost the contract to overhaul Victoria's Meeki ticketing system, has written a letter to the Department of Transport Secretary calling for an urgent review of the tender process. The letter accuses the government of asking NTT Data to increase its bid price, calling into question the value for money of the $1.7 billion deal with Conduent. NTT Data also raises concerns that it was not asked to revise its bid to include new equipment, unlike other bidders. The Andrews government and Public Transport Minister Ben Carroll have defended the deal, but industry insiders and the state opposition have voiced concerns. Title: Tweed Mayor praises flooded home buyback strategy. The Tweed Mayor has lauded a government-led strategy to buy back homes affected by flooding. The Northern Rivers Reconstruction Corporation has released maps of where buybacks would be prioritised under the first round of funding. The move will fast-track work that previously would have taken 75 years to complete. The council has welcomed the program, and Tweed Mayor Chris Cherry said over 220 homes in the region were eligible. The program will buy back some of the worst affected homes out of the floodplain, and hopefully that is going to be done in 1 year. Title: New Hervey Bay Turtle Hospital to reduce distress and save lives. Description: a new turtle hospital in Hervey Bay will bring relief to sick and dying turtles on the Fraser Coast. The Turtle Rehabilitation and Research Centre, to be built by mid-2024, will allow up to 150 of these marine species to be rehabilitated and recover locally. The facility will also help conserve the turtles' natural habitat as researchers investigate the effects of floods and other environmental changes on their health. The center is expected to reduce the stress of transporting injured animals 3 hours away and to bridge science and traditional knowledge to protect the turtles. Hashtags. No more flashy clothes, designer bags or five-star hotels, Chinese bankers told to rein in expenses in austerity drive. China's financial sector is undergoing an austerity drive to bridge the wealth gap. The government has called on financial firms to take measures such as cutting salaries and bonuses, and asking staff not to wear expensive clothes and watches at work. The drive also includes reining in travel and entertainment expenses. The move comes as part of Beijing's push to rein in excesses, and is expected to have a significant impact on the country's high-end retail and hospitality sectors. It remains to be seen how the measures will be enforced and how they will affect the economy and overall business sentiment. Title: Woman suffers constant fear years after sexual assault in Newcastle. A woman who was raped by Justin Kane Millington near the Fernley Track in Newcastle 3 years ago has read her impact statement in court, recounting the constant fear and flashbacks she still experiences. Millington was found guilty of 10 offences related to sexual assault, including rape, after meeting 2 women on Tinder. The victim described how the assault had altered her life, leaving her unable to enjoy activities she once loved. A psychiatrist also testified that Millington suffered from PTSD and borderline personality disorder. The case has been adjourned until July for sentencing. Title: Victoria tightens parole process for murderers following Paul Denier's rejection. Victoria has announced changes to the parole process for murderers in the state, requiring them to wait at least 5 years before reapplying if their initial request is denied. The move comes after campaigning from the families of victims killed by Paul Denier, who applied for parole in May after receiving 3 life sentences for the murders of 3 women. Denier was unsuccessful in his request, prompting the new changes. The government is also considering limiting parole rights for prisoners who have not engaged in meaningful rehabilitation programs. The opposition plans to introduce similar legislation to stop Denier from ever reapplying for parole. Title: NT ministers dodge questions over legal costs of former police commissioner's court battle. The Northern Territory (NT) government has come under fire for its lack of transparency concerning the legal costs of its court battle with former NT Police Commissioner Jamie Chalker. The government reached a confidential settlement with Chalker in April, resulting in his retirement. However, cabinet ministers have refused to disclose the amount spent on legal fees. While Attorney General Chansey Paich has promised to provide a breakdown of the costs to the Estimates Committee, no timeline has been given. The NT Police Association has called for transparency, stating that the public and police deserve to know the costs involved. Title: Reserve Bank contemplates leaving interest rates unchanged this month. The Reserve Bank of Australia (RBA) almost left the official interest rates on hold this month, the minutes of the June 6 meeting have revealed. The RBA board considered the risks of not confronting inflation versus those of raising rates, which could lead to a sharp rise in unemployment. While household pressures were noted, the board raised interest rates to 4.1% due to fears that sustained inflation could become entrenched. The minutes also revealed concerns about recently rebounding real estate prices, which could have less of a drag on consumer spending over the next year. Money markets are factoring in a 90% chance of another rate hike at the RBA's meeting on July 4, taking the cash rate to 4.35%. Josh didn't have support. Gaps in NDIS contributed to death of man at train station, disability advocate says. Disability advocate Samantha Connor has claimed that gaps in the National Disability Insurance Scheme (NDIS) contributed to the death of 24-year-old Josh, who had a heart condition as well as physical and cognitive impairments. Josh died after a confrontation with transport staff at Perth's underground train station, and the family had applied for supported independent living funding for him through NDIS in the months before. However, the funding was denied, and the tragedy could have been prevented if Josh had a support worker, Connor said. The federal government is planning to limit NDIS spending growth over the next 10 years despite criticisms. Indian airline Indigo orders 500 Airbus jets to set new record. India's dominant carrier, Indigo, has set a new record in the aviation industry by ordering 500 passenger jets from Airbus. The purchase agreement for narrow-body A320 aircraft was announced at the Paris Air Show, which is the world's largest aviation and space industry event. This record-setting order, the single biggest purchase agreement in commercial aviation history, highlights the surging demand for air travel in India due to the country's economic growth. As Indian Airlines race to tap into the nation's growing middle-class consumer base, Airbus and Indigo's partnership is democratizing affordable air travel for millions of people. Title: Hunter Valley woman returns home after Thailand accident. A Hunter Valley woman, Kylie Enright, has returned to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital after falling and hitting her head during a holiday in Thailand. Enright, who was placed in a coma, was transported back to Australia on a medically supervised flight after an online fundraiser raised almost $220,000. Enright's husband, Paul Enright, expressed his gratitude to the community for the financial and emotional support given to them during this time. Enright's recovery is expected to take up to a year, with the most improvement occurring between the 3 and 12-month mark. The Enright's travel insurance claim was rejected due to a clause regarding alcohol consumption. Hashtags. Title: SA Premier considers inquiry into greyhound racing industry following life bans for live baiting. South Australia's Premier, Peter Malinauskas, has expressed his willingness to conduct an inquiry into the greyhound racing industry in the state after the life bans of 3 trainers for live baiting. This illegal practice involves using live animals as prey to make greyhounds race faster. The Independent Integrity Hearings panel handed down the bans following a raid at a property north of Adelaide. Malinauskas said he was shocked by the revelations, as he had received reassurances from the industry that such activity did not occur in the state. Greens MP Tammy Franks supported this inquiry, saying the industry needs independent oversight. Title: Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe backs no campaign against Indigenous Voice. Independent Senator Lydia Thorpe has announced her support for the No campaign against an Indigenous voice to Parliament. This comes after what she calls a breakdown in negotiations with the government on Indigenous justice. As part of the referendum process, she aims to be part of the group writing the referendum pamphlet. The Yes Pamphlet Committee has yet to be identified by the federal government. The No pamphlet will be distributed to every household later this year. Meanwhile, the Black Sovereignty Movement held a meeting at Parliament House, attended by about 15 Aboriginal elders and leaders from across the country. Robbing Peter to pay Paul, lawyer jailed for stealing from dead clients' estates. An Australian lawyer has been sentenced to a minimum of 12 months in prison after stealing more than $400,000 from the estates of 2 deceased clients. Kevin Roach, 82, made a series of fraudulent bank transactions between 2018 and 2019, falsifying paperwork to hide the true destination of the funds. Prosecutors said the money was used to repay loans, prop up a company, and transfer $80,000 to a former female client. The judge took Roach's age, prior good character, and genuine remorse into account, but still imposed a 28-month jail term. Charity running Sydney's Catholic cemeteries reprimanded for refusing to open its books for audit. The Catholic Metropolitan Cemeteries Trust, which operates cemeteries such as Rookwood in Western Sydney, has been at loggerheads with the former coalition government over attempts to hand control of burial grounds to a state-run body. The New South Wales Auditor-General has reprimanded the charity running Sydney's Catholic cemeteries after it refused to open its books for audit. A special report by Auditor-General Margaret Crawford cited several refusals by the CMCT to comply with her requests, recommending the New South Wales Treasury look at options to enforce the CMCT's reporting obligations. The CMCT is a registered charity and reports publicly to the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission. Victorian Premier refuses to apologise to female Liberal MP over half-wit grub comment. Victoria's Premier, Daniel Andrews, has refused to apologise to Liberal MP Cindy McLeish amid accusations that he referred to her as a half-wit grub during a heated parliamentary debate. Ms. McLeish described the comments as deeply offensive and demanded an apology. However, Mr. Andrews has refused, stating that he was defending a colleague from unwarranted attacks. The incident has sparked outrage, with Liberal leader John Pesutto describing Mr. Andrews' comments as despicable. The incident highlights ongoing issues with misogyny and inappropriate behaviour in Australian politics. Tennant Creek show cancelled due to volunteer burnout and infrastructure issues. Residents of Tennant Creek are disappointed as their annual agricultural show, scheduled for the second weekend of July, has been cancelled. The Barkly Regional Council cited inadequate infrastructure and volunteer burnout as the reasons for the cancellation. Many community members rely on the funds raised during the event, and local businesses will feel the impact as tourism dollars go elsewhere. While the show committee is in talks with the government to find a solution, a sideshow alley may be the only option this year. The cancellation highlights the challenges faced by small communities in organizing large-scale events. Mistaken belief satchel containing drugs was stolen prompted Garema Place stabbing murder, court hears. Keenan Dowden Carlisle, who pleaded guilty to murdering Jordan Powell in broad daylight in 2021, told a court he mistakenly believed Mr. Powell took his satchel containing his drugs. The killing happened mid-morning, in the middle of a busy city area, in an alleyway just off Garema Place. Court documents reveal that Dowden Carlisle had become increasingly agitated before the stabbing. Prosecutor Anthony Williamson told the court the crime involved the cowardly use of a knife. Victim impact statements expressed the family's shock and stated they would never get over the fact that Mr. Powell was murdered. Lambie calls for ICC investigation of Australian military commanders over war crimes knowledge. Tasmanian Senator Jackie Lambie has requested the International Criminal Court (ICC) investigate senior Australian Defence Force (ADF) commanders over their knowledge of alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. Lambie has criticised the ADF's high command for avoiding scrutiny over their knowledge of unlawful killings and cruel treatment of prisoners by Australian Special Forces. She argued that the information was known by top brass, but they remained unaccountable. Lambie's request for the ICC to investigate is based on media reporting, questioning of Chief of the Defence Force Angus Campbell, and testimony from a defamation trial. Major TV series planned for Australia canned amid rising costs due to US writers' strike. Universal Studios has cancelled a major Australian production, Metropolis, set to employ around 700 cast and crew members, citing the fallout from the US writers' strike. The series was set to be a remake of the 1927 science fiction film, produced for streaming service Apple TV+. The decision was attributed to rising costs and uncertainty around the US strike, which has seen thousands of film and television writers on strike since May 2. Metropolis was one of several productions that would have shared millions in Australian government funding. Founder of cryptocurrency firm Terraform Labs imprisoned for forging documents. Crypto entrepreneur Do Kwon, the former CEO of Terraform Labs, has been sentenced to 4 months in prison in Montenegro for using fake passports. Kwon was detained in March along with Han Chang-jun, Terraform Labs' former finance officer, while attempting to board a flight to Dubai. The pair were charged with forging official documents and were found to be carrying doctored Costa Rican passports, a separate set of Belgian passports, laptop computers, and other devices. Kwon is wanted in the US on allegations of fraud and financial crimes connected to the implosion of Terraform's digital currencies in May 2022.